The silence in the room was not respectful. It was the chilling sound of institutional dismissal. You could almost smell the old colonial mahogany and the stale coffee. A young man, barely 35, stood before a table of gray suits, representatives from the world's most powerful financial bodies. He wasn't pleading for aid, he was demanding dignity. This was not a meeting, it was a confrontation that the history books won't easily forget. The year was 2023, the place was the very heart of the system that had choked Burkina Faso for decades. The young man was Captain Ibrahim Traoré. He looked at them not with defiance, but with a searing, quiet clarity, the kind that cuts through layers of calculated deception. For years, the story of Burkina Faso had been one of whispers and forgotten potential. Decades of help from foreign powers and endless loans had only dug the nation deeper into a crippling debt spiral, turning its rich subsoil into a pipeline for foreign wealth. This is the ultimate contrast framing, the dazzling promise of Western partnership versus the dusty reality on the ground. The promise was prosperity, the reality was dependency. The promise was self-determination. The reality was constant, invisible control. The previous regimes, often backed by the very powers Traoré faced, had been complacent, even complicit, in maintaining this systemic poverty. They took the loans, enriched themselves, and ensured the nation's most valuable assets, its gold, its manganese, its uranium, flowed outwards, not inwards. The people were left with insecurity, poverty, and the hollow echo of broken promises. This was the deep, festering wound Traoré inherited. Think of it like a beautiful, antique clock passed down through generations. It looks magnificent on the outside, but inside, every single gear is rusted, misaligned, and dependent on a foreign, fragile mainspring. When Traoré took the reins, he didn't just wind the clock. He stopped it, took it apart, and decided to forge every single gear himself. He understood that the greatest threat to his nation wasn't a visible army. It was the quiet, bureaucratic machinery of neocolonialism. He saw that every structural adjustment program, every carefully worded treaty, was designed not to solve the problem of poverty, but to manage the problem of African resources escaping Western hands. The hook for the audience here is immediate. A young African soldier daring to challenge the entire global economic structure. The drama is palpable. He steps into this arena, this temple of global finance, not as a supplicant asking for a bigger slice of bread, but as a carpenter demanding the entire oven. The security guards around him, the tense faces of his own staff, the utter shock on the faces of the international delegates, all of it underscored the gravity of this moment. This wasn't just about money. It was about reversing a 60-year historical trajectory. The question on everyone's mind was, who does this young man think he is? And more importantly, how dare he? The transition to the next layer of conflict is smooth because it's a direct consequence of his initial challenge. By rejecting the easy path of continued dependency, Traoré immediately ignited internal resistance. The deep state, the entrenched network of elites, middlemen, and foreign advisors who benefited from the status quo, began to mobilize. They were the ones who told him it was impossible. They were the ones who warned him about the consequences of cutting off the external funding. They used the media, the rumor mill, and every institutional lever they possessed to frame his revolution not as an act of liberation, but as a dangerous, naive plunge into isolation. They pointed to the rising instability in the Sahel, fueled by foreign withdrawal and militant groups, and whispered that his saber-rattling would only make things worse. But Traoré didn't just hear the skepticism, he expected it. He knew that to truly rebuild, you must first dismantle the myth that the system is unchangeable. His first moves weren't military, they were psychological. He stripped the presidential residence of its unnecessary luxury and mandated an austere life for his entire administration, contrasting sharply with the extravagance of his predecessors. He needed to prove, first to his people, and then to the world, that this time the leadership was different. The true battle was internal, earning the trust of the millions who had been betrayed too many times before. This required not just courage, but a deep, almost spiritual commitment to his nation's future, setting the stage for his most defining global confrontation. The internal pressure quickly mounted, morphing the quiet skepticism of the elites into a deafening chorus of international warnings. Every major foreign capital issued statements dripping with coded disapproval. The fear was simple. If Traoré succeeded, the dominoes would fall across the continent, unraveling decades of carefully constructed economic and political control. Yet, the young captain knew the antidote to systemic doubt was not diplomacy. It was radical transparency and a direct appeal to the one group with nothing left to lose: the youth. The entire trajectory of his revolution pivoted on a single, blistering address he delivered not from the marbled halls of Parliament, but from the dusty grounds of the University of Ouagadougou. This decision was deliberate, a powerful symbolic break with the past, framing his cause not as a military coup, but as a generational mandate. The image of Traoré standing before thousands of roaring students is the cinematic moment that defined his leadership. It was a raw, unfiltered exchange, a stark contrast to the scripted, guarded speeches of his predecessors. His voice, usually calm and measured, was charged with an electrifying urgency as he systematically dismantled the logic of dependency. He didn't just talk about resources. He named the players, detailed the exploitation, and laid bare the exact mechanisms through which the nation's wealth was being siphoned off. He used simple, searing analogies. They offer us a bucket of water and take the well. They teach us how to fish, but they own the entire ocean. This simple, undeniable truth resonated with an entire generation that had grown up watching their parents toil yield nothing but deepening poverty. The power of that moment lay in his policy announcement. He didn't just reject the debt. He nationalized the moral imperative to self-sufficiency. He announced the immediate cessation of all large-scale, foreign-run resource contracts that did not grant the state a decisive majority share. It was an economic declaration of independence, a moment of unprecedented audacity that sent shockwaves through the global commodity markets. The reaction was instantaneous and predictable. The media quickly painted him as an erratic radical, a dangerous populist destroying investor confidence. Anonymous security analysts predicted the immediate collapse of his government, citing the inevitable withdrawal of foreign security guarantees against the growing insurgency. The specter of a counter-coup, fueled by external money and internal resentment, hung heavy over the capital. But this was the price of sovereignty, and Traoré had prepared for it, understanding that fear of independence is the final weapon of the hegemon. To counter the threat, Traoré executed his most brilliant maneuver. He entrusted the defense of the nation not to a detached military hierarchy, but to the Volunteers for the Defense of the Homeland, VDP, recruiting tens of thousands of young patriots, farmers, and students. This move was a profound statement of trust. He armed his people, making every village, every student union, and every market square a node of the revolution. This massive, decentralized movement was the true firewall against internal and external destabilization. It reversed the old system's strategy of disempowerment, trading expensive foreign military reliance for cheap, fierce, popular willpower. The contrast was stark. The former regime relied on foreign mercenaries. Traoré relied on the sons and daughters of the soil. The narrative of his opposition shifted from diplomatic disapproval to overt threats. They used the insurgency as leverage, subtly slowing down promised anti-terrorism equipment, hoping to demonstrate the futility of his solo path. But Traoré turned the tables, showing footage of dilapidated foreign-supplied vehicles next to the new, reliable equipment secured through new, diversified partnerships. partnerships secured through unconditional respect and mutual benefit, not through the poisoned chalice of conditional aid. He showed his nation that the only people who truly cared about their security were themselves. This defiance wasn't rash. It was the ultimate calculated risk, a gamble on the inherent moral strength and intelligence of his people. He dared the world to watch him succeed using only the strength he found at home. The entire conflict was distilled into a single, breathtaking question. Could sheer courage and communal will defeat generations of entrenched economic and military power? The youth, standing unified behind their commander, were ready to provide the answer, understanding that their struggle was not just for Burkina Faso, but for the entire continent trapped in the same historic cycle. The collective will, once awakened, proved to be the most potent force in the Sahel. The VDP, dismissed as a ragtag militia by foreign military experts, systematically stabilized areas that professional armies had failed to secure for years. The youth, fighting for their homes and their future, showed a ferocity and local knowledge that external forces could never match. This security gain immediately parlayed into the economic turnaround, the tangible proof of Traoré's gamble. The revenue from the renegotiated mining contracts, which finally placed the national interest first, didn't vanish into foreign bank accounts or political slush funds. It flowed directly into social infrastructure. The contrast with the past was startling, where once foreign aid dictated which clinics were built, and where, now the state, flush with its own resource wealth, funded hundreds of new primary schools and clinics in the underserved rural areas. It was a visible, undeniable transaction. Sovereignty equals development. But this monumental gain came with an equally monumental price: personal peril. The forces that profited from the old system, the shadowy networks of international crime, defeated terrorist affiliates, and angry political remnants, did not simply retreat. They targeted the symbol of their failure. The young leader, who had rejected the bulletproof limousines and palace walls of his predecessors, driving instead in a simple pickup truck, became the most exposed man in the region. His image, often seen eating simple food with soldiers at the front lines, was not just PR. It was a commitment that defied the standard model of protected power. He faced, on a daily basis, the active threat of assassination, sabotage, and destabilization plots fueled by enemies both near and far. This constant, unseen threat created the ultimate contrast framing for his legacy. On one side stood the vision, a rapidly developing, self-sufficient Burkina Faso becoming the blueprint for a truly independent Africa, inspiring nations across the continent to reclaim their own resource wealth. On the other side stood the cost, a single life, constantly under siege, a testament to the fact that true sovereignty must be bought with courage, often the ultimate sacrifice. Yet Traoré never wavered. He understood that his revolution was bigger than any individual. He was simply the necessary lightning rod, channeling the latent energy of a frustrated continent. His most profound success was not military or economic, but psychological. He restored the self-belief of an entire people, proving that black ingenuity, black courage, and black political will could defeat a rigged system designed to fail them. His actions transcended Burkina Faso. They became a rallying